Okay, squirrel listeners, I'm going to try this again today. Y'all won't believe the trouble. I'm on my phone now, so I'm going to get going before it cuts out on me. I've been reading. I've read chapter 10, I don't know how many times on my Chromebook, and I'm having trouble. Anyway, here we go, back on chapter 10 of what I thought I got read, but it didn't get there. So this was the last thing I read. I know something about it, said Anne sympathetically, remembering Roy Gardner. Oh, Miss Shirley, I'm sure I don't love him enough to marry him. I realize that now that it's too late. I was just moonlighted into thinking I loved him. If it hadn't been for the moon, I'm sure I would have asked for time to think it over. But I was swept off my feet. I can see that now. Oh, I'll run away. I'll do something desperate. But Hazel, dear, if you feel you've made a mistake, why not just tell him? Oh, Miss Shirley, I couldn't. It would kill him. He simply adores me. There isn't any way out of it, really, and Terry's beginning to talk of getting married. Think of it, a child like me. I'm only 18. All the friends I've told about my engagement as a secret are congratulating me. And it's such a farce. They think Terry is such a great catch because he comes into $10,000 when he's 25. His grandmother left it to him, as if I cared about such a sordid thing as money. Oh, Miss Shirley, why is it such a mercenary world? Why? I suppose it is mercenary in some respects, but not in all, Hazel. And if you feel like this about Terry, we all make mistakes. It's very hard to know our own minds sometimes. Oh, isn't it? I knew you'd understand. I did think I cared for him, Miss Shirley. The first time I saw him, I just sat and gazed at him the whole evening. Waves went over me when I met his eyes. He was so handsome. Though I thought even then that his hair was too curly and his eyelashes too white. That should have warned me. But I always put my soul into everything, you know. I'm so intense. I felt little shivers of ecstasy whenever he came near me, and now I feel nothing. Nothing. Oh, I've grown old these past few weeks, Miss Shirley. Old. I've hardly eaten anything since I got engaged. Mother could tell you. I'm sure I don't love him enough to marry him. Whatever else I may be in doubt about, I know that. Then you shouldn't. Even that moonlight night he proposed to me, I was thinking of what dress I'd wear to Joan Pringle's fancy dress party. I thought it would be lovely to go as Queen of the May in pale green with a sash of darker green and a cluster of pale pink roses in my hair, and a maypole decked with tiny roses and hung with pink and green ribbons. Wouldn't it have been fetching? And then Joan's uncle had to go and die, and Joan couldn't have the party after all, so it all went for nothing. But the point is, I really couldn't have loved him when my thoughts were wandering like that, could I? I don't know. Our thoughts play us curious tricks sometimes. I really don't think I ever want to get married at all, Miss Shirley. Do you happen to have an orange wood stick handy? Thanks. My half moons are getting ragged. And she's talking about her fingernails. I might as well do them while I'm talking. Isn't it just lovely to be exchanging confidences like this? It's so seldom one gets the opportunity. The world intrudes itself so. Well, what was I thinking of? Oh, yes, Terry. What am I to do, Miss Shirley? I want your advice. Oh, I feel like a trapped creature. But Hazel, it's so simple. Oh, it isn't simple at all, Miss Shirley. It's dreadfully complicated. Mom is so outrageously pleased, but Aunt Jean isn't. She doesn't like Terry, and everybody says she has good judgment. I don't want to marry anybody. I'm ambitious. I want a career. Sometimes I think I want to be a nun. Wouldn't it be wonderful to be the bride of heaven? I think the Catholic Church is so picturesque, don't you? But of course, I'm not Catholic. And anyway, I suppose you could hardly call it a career. I've always felt I'd love to be a nurse at such a romantic profession, don't you think? Smoothing fevered brows and all that. And some handsome millionaire patient falling in love with you and carrying you off to spend a honeymoon in a villa on the Riviera, facing the morning sun and the blue Mediterranean. I've seen myself in it. Foolish dreams, perhaps, but oh, so sweet. I can't give them up for the prosaic reality of marrying Terry Garland and settling down in Summerside. Hazel shivered at the very idea and scrutinized a half moon critically. I suppose, began Anne. We haven't anything in common, you know, Miss Shirley. He doesn't care for poetry and romance, and they're my very life. Sometimes I think I must be the reincarnation of Cleopatra, or would it be Helen of Troy? She has a good impression of herself, doesn't she? Any of those languorous, seductive creatures, anyhow. I have such wonderful thoughts and feelings. I don't know where I get them if that isn't the explanation, and Terry is so terribly matter of fact. He can't be a reincarnation of anybody. What he said when I told him about Vera Fry's quill pen proves that, doesn't it? But I've never heard of Vera Fry's quill pen, said Anne patiently. Oh, haven't you? I thought I told you. I've told you so much. Vera's fiancé gave her a quill pen he had made out of a feather he'd picked up that had fallen from a crow's wing. He said to her, "Let your spirit soar to heaven with it whenever you use it, like the bird who once bore it." Wasn't that just wonderful? But Terry said the pen would wear out very soon, especially if Vera wrote as much as she talked. And anyway, he didn't think crows ever soared to heaven. He just missed the meaning of the whole thing completely. Its very essence. What was its meaning? Oh, why soaring, you know. Getting carried away from the clods of earth. Did you notice Vera's ring? A sapphire. I think sapphires are too dark for engagement rings. I'd rather have your dear romantic little hoop of pearls. Terry wanted to give me my ring right away, but I said not yet. A while. It would seem like a fetter so irrevocable, you know. I wouldn't have felt like if I'd really loved it. I wouldn't have felt like that if I'd really loved him, would I? No, I'm afraid not. It's been so wonderful to tell somebody what I really feel like. Oh, Miss Shirley, if I could only find myself free again, free to seek the deeper meaning of life. Terry wouldn't understand what I mean if I said that to him, and I know he has a temper. All the Garlands have. Oh, Miss Shirley, if you would just talk to him, tell him what I feel like. He thinks you're wonderful. He'd be guided by what you say. Hazel, my dear little girl, how could I do that? I don't see why not. Hazel finished the last new moon and laid the orange wood stick down tragically. If you can't, there isn't any help anywhere. But I could never, never, never marry Terry Garland. If you don't love Terry, you ought to go and just tell him so, no matter how badly it will make him feel. Someday you'll meet someone you really love, Hazel dear. You won't have any doubts about then. You'll know. I shall never love anybody again, said Hazel, stonily calm. Love brings only sorrow. Young as I am, I've learned that. This would make a wonderful plot for one of your stories, wouldn't it, Miss Shirley? I must be going. I had no idea it was so late. I feel so much better since I've confided in you. Touched your soul in Shadowland, as Shakespeare says. I think it was Pauline Johnson, said Anne gently. Well, I knew it was somebody who had lived. I think I shall sleep tonight, Miss Shirley. I've hardly slept since I found myself engaged to Terry, without the least notion how it had all come about. Hazel fluffed out her hair and put on her hat, a hat with with a rosy lining to its brim and rosy blossoms around it. She looked so distractingly pretty in it that Anne kissed her impulsively. "You're the prettiest thing, darling," she said admiringly. Hazel stood very still. Then she shifted her eyes and stared clear through the ceiling of the tower room, clear through the attic above it, and sought the stars. "I shall never, never forget this wonderful moment, Miss Shirley," she muttered rapturously. "I feel that my beauty, if I have any, has been consecrated. Oh, Miss Shirley, you don't know how really terrible it is to have a reputation for beauty, and to be always afraid that when people meet you, they will not think you're as pretty as you were reported to be. It's torture. Sometimes I just die of mortification when I fancy I can see they're disappointed. Perhaps it's only my imagination. I'm so imaginative, too. Too much so for my own good, I fear. I imagined I was in love with Terry, you see. Oh, Miss Shirley, can you smell the apple blossom fragrance?" Having a nose, Anne could. "Isn't it just divine? I hope heaven will be all flowers. One could be good if one lived in a lily, couldn't one?" "I'm afraid it might be a little confining," said Anne perversely. "Oh, Miss Shirley, don't be sarcastic. With your little adorer, sarcasm just shrivels me up like a leaf." "I see she hasn't talked you quite to death," said Rebecca Dew, when Anne had come back after seeing Hazel to the end of Spook's Lane. "I don't see how you put up with her." "I like her, Rebecca, I really do. I was a dreadful little chatterbox when I was a child. I wonder if I sounded as silly to the people who had to listen to me as Hazel does sometimes." "I didn't know you when you was a child, but I'm sure you didn't," said Rebecca, "because you would mean what you said, no matter how you expressed it, and Hazel Marr doesn't. She's nothing but skim milk pretending to be cream." I love that. I've never heard that saying, but I think I'll adopt it. Of of course she dramatizes herself a bit, as most girls do, but I think she means some of the things she says, said Anne, thinking of Terry. Perhaps it was because she had a rather poor opinion of the said Terry that she believed Hazel was quite in earnest in all she'd said about him. Anne thought Hazel was throwing herself away on Terry in spite of the 10,000 he was coming into, and considered Terry a good-looking, rather weak youth who would fall in love with the first pretty girl who made eyes at him, and would with equal facility fall in love with the next one if number one turned him down or left him alone too long. Anne had seen a good deal of Terry that spring, for Hazel had insisted on her playing gooseberry frequently, and she was destined to see more of him, for Hazel went to visit friends in Kingsport, and during her absence Terry rather attached himself to Anne, taking her out for rides and seeing her home from places. They called each other Anne and Terry, for they were about the same age, although Anne felt quite motherly towards him. Terry felt immensely flattered that the clever Miss Shirley seemed to like his companionship, and he became so sentimental the night of May Conley's party in a moonlit garden, where the shadows of the acacias blew crazily about, that Anne amusedly reminded him of the absent Hazel. "Oh, Hazel," said Terry, "that child." "You're engaged to that child, aren't you?" said Anne severely. "Not really engaged. Nothing but some boy-girl nonsense. I guess I was just swept off my feet by moonlight." Anne did a bit of rapid thinking. If Terry really cared so little for Hazel as this, the child was far better freed from him. Perhaps this was a heaven-sent opportunity to extricate them both from the silly tangle they'd gotten themselves into, and from which neither of them, taking things with all the deadly seriousness of youth, knew how to escape. "Of course," went on Terry, misinterpreting her silence, "I'm in a bit of a predicament, I'll own. I'm afraid Hazel has taken me a little bit too seriously, and I just don't know the best way to open her eyes to her mistake." Impulsively, Anne assumed her most maternal look. "Terry, you're a couple of children playing at being grown up. Hazel doesn't really care any more for you than you do for her. Apparently, the moonlight affected both of you. She wants to be free, but is afraid to tell you so for fear of hurting your feelings. She's just a bewildered, romantic girl, and you're a boy in love with love, and someday you'll both have a good laugh at yourselves." I think I put that rather nicely, thought Anne complacently. Terry drew a long breath. "You've taken a weight off my mind, Anne. Hazel's a sweet little thing, of course. I hated to think of hurting her, but I've realized our mistake for some weeks. When one meets a woman, the woman, you're not going in yet, Anne. Is all this good moonlight to be wasted? You look like a white rose in the moonlight, Anne." But Anne had flown. And that's the end of chapter 10. Please, Lord, let this upload, the whole thing. We'll read chapter 11 tomorrow, I hope. Love y'all. Be sweet, don't be ugly. No life today. Tomorrow at 5. Bye-bye.